Good morning. On behalf of everyone here at EGW Utilities, I want to welcome you to our first ever Utility Solutions Conference. We know you're busy people, so we're grateful that you've chosen to join us for some or all of our event over the next few days. We've got an exciting program put together for you beginning this morning and running through Thursday of this week. The format for this week's sessions will primarily be structured in a problem-solution format. In other words, we will identify a common industry problem or issue and then provide some potential solutions. We're using this approach because it closely aligns with our core purpose of solving problems, making connections, and serving others. Our presenters this week are recognized as experts in their respective fields, and they're donating their time to be here with us. In addition, they are also donating a door prize that will be given away to one of the registered participants at the end of every session. Those door prizes are all valued at a minimum of $100. During the sessions, you will be able to submit questions in writing using the chat function on the Teams platform that we will be utilizing, and will answer as many of your questions as we have time for during the session. If your question is not answered during the session itself, we will provide you an answer afterwards via the email address that you used on your registration. EGW celebrated our 20-year anniversary on the 15th of this month, and we are very proud and thankful that you have entrusted us to be your solutions provider during that time. From the time we opened our doors in 2001, EGW has become known for our spring, summer roadshow, where we visit numerous locations around the country, displaying and demonstrating our products. In 2020, we weren't able to do this because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we adapted our roadshow to a virtual format in order to provide you with the latest and greatest that we had to offer. The Utility Solutions Conference, the event that we're kicking off this morning, is our 2021 version of the roadshow, and I hope that you'll find it informative and educational. I also hope that we can get back to seeing you, our customers, face to face in the very near future. I'll see you at the end of the event to wrap it up, and I'll give away a very nice door prize to one lucky participant. I hope you enjoy the event. Thanks again for joining us for EGW's Virtual Utility Solutions Conference. Now let's get this show on the road.
Thank you very much, Phil. My name is Mike McGee. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending our first ever EGW Utility Solutions Conference. We know how valuable your time is, and you could be spending that time doing a lot of other things, and we respect that, and we want to make the most out of the time that you've chosen to spend with us this morning. So the title of this first session is Blowdowns and Venting Gas Problems and Solutions. Joining us today on this topic is Doug Sahm with ZVAC. We'd really like to thank Doug for taking his time to share some of his insights with us. Let's talk about a couple of things. Door prizes. As Phil mentioned in his opening statement, there will be a door prize given away in each and every session of the conference. The door prizes will be donated by various sponsors, and we'd like to thank all of our sponsors for the contributions that benefit these sessions and for their overall support of this week's event. This session's door prize is being sponsored by ZVAC, and it will be, I believe it's a Yeti cooler. The drawing for that will be held directly following this session, and then if you win, you'll be contacted if your name is drawn. Let's go over a couple of the ground rules. Here in just a minute, I will properly introduce Doug, but I wanted to go over just a few of the rules for the session. You can see that we're bringing this conference to you via Microsoft Teams live events. For those of you who are familiar with Microsoft Teams or Zoom or one of the other platforms that you may have used over the last year during COVID, these meetings, it's going to look similar to that, but there's going to be some significant differences as well. So in live events, with these functional differences, basically you'll be able to see us, you'll be able to hear us, but we won't be able to see or hear you. So we won't be able to see your smiling faces at all, but you'll be able to see what's going on our end, provided I don't have any more technical difficulties. But that's basically the main differences. Now, you can still interact with us, and we do encourage you to ask questions. There's a chat function that you'll have access to. You'll notice a little icon on your screen. It's that little comment bubble with a question mark in the middle of it. And if you click that, it'll open a Q&A chat box that will allow you to submit questions. And as you think of the questions throughout the session, we encourage you to please submit those using that function. I'll be collecting questions as they're submitted and then relaying them to our presenters whenever we transition into the Q&A portion of each of the sessions. All questions will be anonymous, so don't worry about anyone judging your questions at all. We'd love to get as many questions as possible, and hopefully we can get them all answered in the time that we have allotted. On a side note, don't worry about, again, just to go back to, you're not going to interrupt the presentation at all if you ask questions. There will be no interruption at all. I'll just collect those and then we'll present them to the, or we'll ask those questions to the presenter at the end. Okay, that's about it for ground rules. At this time, I would like to introduce Doug Sahm. Doug, if you want to go ahead and share your presentation, I'll try and get this all teed up for you. So Doug is the CTO at TPE Midstream and the inventor of the ZVAC technology. With numerous patents issued and pending, he enjoys continuously pushing the emissions capture technology forward while leaving a lasting positive impact on the natural gas industry. He earned his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Illinois and currently holds his professional engineering license in Oklahoma. Now, without further ado, I will hand the controls off to Doug, and he can take it from here. Doug?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me and putting this together. A little bit tongue-in-cheek, I'm going to try to speak as little as possible. So what I did to put together this sort of problems and solutions presentation was, I decided really what we need to hear from is really the voice of the industry, not the voice of Doug. So what we're going to go through is a presentation about blowdowns and venting gas, but it's a little different format. It's going to be a series of interviews with utility operators and contractors about the issues they're facing, what are the problems and what's working, what's not working. And so we're going to hear directly from them. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Brad Stieber is one of our interviewees with CenterPoint. CenterPoint's been doing a lot of great work in the methane emission reduction arena, and I'll let Brad introduce himself.
My name is Brad Stieber, the Technical Field Operations Manager for CenterPoint Energy out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And technical field operations for CenterPoint involves leak detection, corrosion, measurement, odorization, as well as electronics or instrumentation.
And our next interviewee is Rick from Con Ed in New York. He's been in this game around emission reduction for a long time and really has a good perspective on it.
Hi, well, Rick Trieste with Con Ed Company of New York. I am currently Department Manager of Research and Development Demonstration, having had multiple positions in operations engineering prior to my current position. So as an operator, I'm very familiar with the leak repair and main replacement process and the actions required for us to undertake that. And now, of course, in research and development, we're looking for ways to perform better, perform more efficiently as better citizens to the environment. And that has really been how I got into this business.
And we're also going to hear from Nick from Dominion. Dominion's been sort of at the forefront of the net zero movement and has been doing a lot in methane emissions reduction.
I'm Nick Piro, CAS Business Development Manager at Dominion Energy, located up here in Ohio.
And then our fourth interviewee that you'll be hearing from is Gina Rundo. Gina provides a different perspective, having worked for a utility and now working for one of the biggest contractors in the gas space. She's just got a different perspective that's really interesting.
Gina Rondo, currently employed with Artera Services, who is the parent company to major pipeline construction companies such as Miller, Otis Eastern, KS, SEC, Hydro, also Minnesota Limited, to name a few. Formerly employed with a Fortune 200 gas company, and was employed with that company for about 13 years. When I was with the company, I ran all their live gas operational work. So hot tapping and line isolation, pipeline pigging, and also what's going to be discussed today, cross compression services.
So we're going to hear from four of the leaders in the industry, and what we're going to be talking about is really the venting emissions. So when we talk about emissions, there's a whole lot of ground that covers. But the difference in what we're discussing is the intentionality. So what we're chasing when we talk about blowdowns are the events where we have a procedure, we have a process that involves going out on purpose and releasing gas. And what we're going to hear from this, diverse set of leaders in the industry is, Con Edison might have 11 million customers in 30 square miles. They operate in New York City, whereas Dominion or CenterPoint has, a multi-state, huge footprint, and Artera providing a different perspective of working for more than one operator. And what they all have in common is a view on the intentionality of venting. And that's what we're going to get into. So not like leaks, right, or line strikes. Venting is intentional, and that provides a different set of problems where you're not just dealing with the greenhouse gas effects of the release, you also have the PR problem. You have the investor pressure. It's really hard to sell a net zero ambition and not have a plan for the fact that you have intentional process and procedure that involves releasing gas. So that's really what we're going to be focused on, and that's the context for these interviews. It's really about venting and blowdowns and what's working. So to get started, we'll hear from Nick just about the variety of blowdowns.
It's probably mostly state dependent for us. Up here in Ohio and West Virginia, we have pipeline replacement projects going on right now. So we're taking old pipe, primarily bare steel, plastic, installing plastic. So we have a lot of activity around pipeline replacement. So those events are, I'll say, fairly frequent because we are in the midst of these projects. Our other regions, out west Utah, North South Carolina, their systems are a little more upgraded. So these pipeline replacement projects aren't there as much. And so there's routine maintenance. So I guess they'll still see a spec from maybe at a less frequency than we're seeing during these pipeline replacement projects.
So you can imagine the variety of situations that blowdowns may happen. But before we dive all the way into that, I went ahead and asked each of our interviewees just how they would describe a blowdown. What is it? And it's interesting to hear, when you have four leaders in the industry come to a consensus point of view, you have to listen. And here's what they had to say when we talked about, for anybody who hasn't been exposed to this problem in the past, what is a blowdown?
Yeah, in Con Ed, we utilize the term synonymously. Pretty much, a blowdown, as we treat it, would be the venting, the purging, the releasing of the gas from the pipe we're working on into the atmosphere. So rather than capturing it or moving it into another piping system, it's the release of the entrained methane into the atmosphere. And that could be from purging a pipe into service, purging a pipe out of service, or the purging of a pressure test gas if we're using methane.
A blowdown is just a way to access the pipe in a safe manner. So if we have to possibly work on the pipeline itself and or are replacing the pipeline, there are several methods of making repairs externally on the pipeline that do not need to remove the gas from the inside. But in many instances, especially if we're going to be replacing the pipe or some other type of repairs or inspections, we have to physically get that gas out of the pipeline. And so there's different methods or different ways to remove that gas. We can turn some valves and create an isolated section. We can set some stoppers with some stopping equipment. And then at that point, to safely access that pipe, we have to remove that gas and then purge all of the combustible gas out of the pipe to where crew members or contractors can physically cut the pipe and access it.
So really, I think the best way I could describe, what is a blowdown is really kind of maybe the situations where we see it happening. And it's typically routine maintenance of a pipeline, cleaning out the pipeline, pigging a pipeline, or upgrading a pipeline. So that's kind of planned work, routine maintenance work. And then the other situation or primary situation would be emergencies. Maybe we have a hit line. Then we have to go back and block off a couple of valves and blow down that piece of line in an emergency to be able to repair it. So those are the two primary reasons for blowdowns.
Yeah, so a blowdown is done so the operator themselves can perform maintenance or repairs to the pipeline in a safe environment. So really a blowdown is releasing all the natural gas and methane from the pipeline in order to safely perform construction or maintenance or repairs to the pipeline itself.
Yeah, so we have a pretty well aligned consensus view on what is a blowdown. And so the next question that I asked was, so what, right? We've been doing this for a long time. What's the problem?
Large slew of problems with blowdowns, and really, I think they're more noticeable depending on where your work is taking place. So, for instance, if we have a large blowdown in downtown Minneapolis, we are going to see some more problems than we are out in the western part of the state in the middle of a cornfield. The problems that we see really involve the public and our customers. So we are creating odor complaints. So the gas that we are releasing most of the time is odorized, and it's odorized for safety so that people can smell gas and try to ensure that any potential leak is captured by our service techs, which is initiated by this leak call from the customers. So we get leak calls, and basically they're nuisances. We know that we are releasing this gas. We know that it's odorized, and there was just nothing else to be done about it. So the gas is released. People in the public, customers, smell the gas. They call into CenterPoint Energy, and we are dispatched to go investigate. There's also noise issues. So whenever we are releasing this gas, a lot of times it's going to be at a higher pressure. So that pressure cut going from high pressure to zero is very loud. And so it also has to kind of structure our day, around noise ordinances, noise permits that we may have to receive.
reality, the problem is they're happening, right? That you know, we're a company that delivers a product, and that product is being blown out of the pipeline. So just at that fact alone, you can see that problem there. But also the emission factor of methane going to atmosphere, it's pretty high equivalent greenhouse gas factor. So again, back to the net zero commitments, sustainability commitments we have, it is a large component of our effort to reduce that venting and emissions for those reasons.
So there you have two different utilities perspectives of when asked what's the problem, you've got one person saying, well, yeah, sure, you've got emissions, but what you have to deal with is odor complaints, noise complaints, ordinances, permits, and the public, right? And then you've got this other kind of more fundamental or philosophical point of view, which is this is our product and we're blowing it out of the pipe. So the view of the problem, depends on your vantage and where you sit every day and what you have to deal with. But there's no ambiguity around the issue itself. So then, if we understand what a blowdown is and what the problems are, the next questions really get into what are you doing about it? And so that's where we'll head next with our interviewees, is really what are the leaders doing, what's working and what's not, and we'll hear more from our interviewees.
The first step really is just a question. Is it needed? Do we need to vent? Do we need to blow down? And then from that point, we can kind of work down this tree. Yes, it's needed. We have to access the inside of the pipe. Okay, what are some other alternative methods, or what is some other planning or engineering that can go into this? For instance, if we have a 2-mile section of 24-inch steel that's at 100 pounds, and in between the two valves that we close, we have a regulator station that is basically knocking the pressure down to 50 pounds or 10 pounds, and then pushing that gas up to the distribution piping, up to the individual homes. If we can take a little bit of extra time, and once we isolate this section, draw this system pressure down, it will equalize to our distribution pressure. So now we've taken this 100-pound pipe and we've brought the pressure down to 10 pounds because that's what the pressure was downstream on the distribution side. So now we've basically eliminated a large amount of our potential blowdown just by taking the extra time to reduce the pressure. I mean, the greenhouse gas emissions, also the noise, all of these are built off of the pressure and the volume in that pipe. So if we can reduce either of those, whether it's the volume or the pressure, now we've reduced the impact and the potential of what we would be doing. Some other methods, certainly we have the ability to flare if needed. Flaring has its own problems as well. Now we have a visible flame out in the public, which draws attention. And I think it's safe to say that it doesn't draw good attention. There is literally a flame that is burning gas. No matter how safe it may appear, it does not always look safe to the general public. Some other methods are cross compressing. To the general public. Some other methods are cross compressing. So basically we would take that gas that is stranded and we can hook it up to a tool or a compressor of type and literally suck it out, compress it up, and dump it where we need it to go. So you could picture it like almost like a vacuum cleaner or possibly like a bicycle pump. So we're going to pull that gas out and push it over to where we need to go.
Yeah, I love that's Brad from Centerpoint. His point of view is always so pragmatic and practical. They've been doing these things for a long time, and appreciate him kind of describing their 3 sort of go-to solutions being pull down through a regulator, the option of flaring, which carries its own issues, and then cross compression, which are all things we'll talk more about. Let's hear from Nick at Dominion.
A great example is our compression department. I don't know that I go a week without hearing a new idea, a new technique, a new procedure, research they're doing to mitigate venting on almost every activity they do, whether it's installing as big a project as potentially installing new compression with upgraded emission equipment, to installing vapor recovery. Just, it's unbelievable how well they've grasped it. And then our live gas operations team, I mean, they literally reduce venting every day they're at work. That is a primary responsibility they have. And these are seasoned folks that have been with the company for 30 years, some of them plus. And I mean, I'm not going to say that those are the ones that are resistant to change all the time, but a lot of times when you're used to the way things are, right, you don't change. It's human nature to resist it, right? That team is knocking it out of the park with all their activity and the work they're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, for that perspective. Dominion does a really good job of trying to democratize, the idea generation. So they push a lot of their effort out to the organization, and then rely on those groups to sort of find new options and new solutions. But as we were conducting these interviews, we kind of felt that the solutions people were using fell into a few different buckets. And so now we're going to look at kind of how the approach changes between your large blowdowns, your very significant releases that probably happen less often, and then we'll work our way down that curve of applications into the day-to-day work. So let's hear from the group on what's working for the big blowdowns.
I mean, the low-hanging fruit is the large jobs, right? The large transmission jobs, 30 miles of pipe that maybe was going to be vented, or 2,000 feet of 24-inch steel. Those are the low-hanging fruit. That's what is very attractive. It's easy to show it off. You can see the benefits rather easily.
The quick wins are these blowdowns, ventings, emissions, from major pipe replacements, right? These activities release, they're typically very well planned. They're planned in advance, well staffed, procedures provided for each of the operations, and that's where it's the quick fix to get on an emissions-free operating process, right? The ZVAC technology, for example, it's perfectly suited for this type of application. It's scalable for operations, right?
Primarily the projects right now are falling into that plan category. We could kind of touched on them a little bit earlier. So when we have a larger diameter, we're trying to, you say low-hanging fruit, so to speak, but these larger diameter, higher pressure pipelines, is just kind of get more bang for your buck there, of course.
So in terms of a methane reduction mitigation perspective, I've seen, through my experience with my former operator, and then also now seeing, from Artera, what's working really well to continue to be efficient also, when you consider that as a big factor, is incorporating hot tapping and line stopping, which essentially means you're putting a fitting on the pipeline so you can make a safe entry into the pipeline, and really instead of using a valve on a transmission system that might be, 10 miles down the way, you're reducing that methane footprint right off the bat by minimizing that blowdown space. So what's working, I do believe, is hot tapping and line stopping, or line isolation is what we call it in the industry. What I also see working is large compression, cross compression. Now, there is a little bit more planning and time commitment that needs to be associated with it. So that's why I've seen hot tapping and line stopping work a little bit better in terms of efficiency. And when you think about time as being a factor, and then incorporating that with smaller compression. So instead of doing, a large decommissioning and recycling of the gas for, say, 10 miles with larger compressors, I see a greater success rate of minimizing that footprint as much as possible with hot tapping and line plugging, and then using that rest of the space that you would need to blow down still. So say it's 1,000 feet of a working section, you take that and you use cross compression with it.
So that's a good variety, and I, in the interest of keeping this presentation reasonable, I had to cut out a lot of footage, but I listed here, some of the things that we've talked about. Regulator drawdowns being described by Brad at Centerpoint, and then Gina talked a little bit about, taking a much smaller piece of the pipe out via hot tap and bypass. And then mobile cross compression is a common technique, both at large scale and small scale, as well as combustors of various varieties, all being used on these big blowdowns planned work. And then let's listen how the approaches change as we get down into the more moderate sized but much more regular occurring blowdowns.
But now that we're, more in the midst of these projects and processes to mitigate, I firmly believe we're going to start seeing the smaller diameter pipeline and service lines fall into play here at some point. That close to the house, that close to building, there's a lot more to think about than just the emission factors. Although that's one of the key factors for sure.
So we have a rather intensive main replacement program through the construction season up here, which is a little bit shorter than other parts of the country. But we're talking hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of steel and plastic pipe being replaced just within one construction season. So a very large scale, very intense. There are probably venting and blowdown activities multiple times a week by several crews, whether they be internal or external contractors.
So, a good example that I like to bring up is ILI related. So inline inspection or integrity work, right? Mm-hmm. So this is kind of your middle range space. Typically operators, they perform, quite a bit of pipeline pigging activities, whether if it's a cleaning activity or doing an ILI run itself. Those happen quite often on an annual basis. And when you think about every time an operator has to open up that 36-inch barrel operating at about, 500 plus PSI, that adds up over time. So, that's something that you see as, or at least that I saw with my experience being on the operator front, that's a quick win. When you're launching pigs through a pipeline to perform a cleaning inspection or an actual ILI smart tool inspection, right? Those tools aren't getting released, in a 15-minute capacity over and over. They're typically staged, every half hour to 45 minutes. So every time an operator opens that barrel in order to safely release a pig through the line and pressurize the system back up, that operator is required to vent out that barrel. So if you think about it, say an operator has to launch 6 cleaning pigs for that required operation, right? That's essentially, with an inspection, 7 times just at the launcher barrel, and then 7 times more at the receiver barrel. So 14 blowdown events would essentially happen on a 36-inch barrel, say, for example, operating at 500 PSI. That's going to add up for your total methane reduction scope and MCF savings over time. Not only that, but a lot of the pigging facilities that some operators have, they're in areas that, you know, would typically receive a lot of calls from the public in concerns to odor complaints or in concerns to noise complaints. So you think that you also factor that into consideration, not only from an environmental methane savings perspective, but also from just a public perception perspective, and to really reduce from an operator having to manage some of those calls of concern coming in too.
Yeah, so we started with the big, you know, miles and miles of big inch pipe and heard about some of those things that are working. And then as you talk more about the weekly or everyday, Brad Stever described their main replacement program. You know, you have multiple crews doing this multiple times a week, you know, or like Gina described, you know, a pigging program where you might have 14 blowdowns, you know, within a span of a few days. The options that are available sort of change as the scale of the release comes down, but the frequency goes up. You know, it's more important to be portable and you know, mobile to keep up with those crews, and that effect gets exaggerated as we keep going down the curve to the, you know, everyday work. So let's hear from our group on what they see, you know, and what they feel around the everyday, the small stuff, how it's different.
The part of our movement that is kind of going to take a while is the day-to-day activities. It's the walking up to a meter set to change out a meter and not just loosening the spud nut and letting that meter drain. You know, we essentially getting to be able to capture 90% of the methane, 95% of our daily activities is going to be the hard part.
You know, the analogy of safety you just discussed is really incredibly germane, right? Because, you know, we as operators years ago, it was, you know, keep the gas in the pipe, you know, do it quick. You know, it was all about quick and efficiency. And that might mean that we would do things, you know, we would catch gas more so as opposed to valve out the pipe, because the act of valving out the pipe to make that repair, to avoid to do that act was quick. And if we have to do something else, we're going to take customers out of service. You know, it was just not part of the standard operating procedure. But now, you know, going into anytime we work on live gas, we have a whole new way we don personal protective equipment. Things that were acceptable in the past are just completely unacceptable now and appalling if you see them, and they're corrected immediately. And that's the type shift we need for methane emissions. There's no reason to have a planned release for any sake, forgetting emergencies, right? If it's a planned activity, there is no reason to ever have a release, and we have to evolve to accept that.
Yeah, so, you know, from my perspective, I think no matter, you know, regardless if it's a large volume that you would, you know, historically be releasing, so, you know, transmission pipelines, or if it's a small, service. I think they both have their place and the level of importance. So maybe from, a rural area where a transmission line might be running, and it may be the volumetric methane that might be the primary driver. But when you talk about the small, low pressure lines, might be 2-inch services that are running through a high city area, it might not be the environmental piece that's driving it. It might be more of the perspective of, look, we got, an office building right behind us. We're right on the street corner. We might only be saving 1,000 SCF, but
My apologies, I cut Gina off there. Well, I'm going to see if I can go back and let her finish. Just a moment.
and by the way, if you use cross compression, cross compression for this, it's not going to take up a bunch of time either. So that's something that, we've seen work. So yeah, you're getting maybe your most environmental sustainability reporting numbers, right, from a large takedown and decommissioning project, but at the other side of it, you're not spending much time to really mitigate the methane associated for a smaller diameter project.
Yeah, so that's a great example. So we talked about
the venting issue really is a function of our sustainability commitments here at Dominion. We have made multiple commitments revolving, ultimately culminating in net zero by 2050. And realized pretty early on that reducing venting, particularly reducing methane emission venting, is going to be a key component for us to reach that goal. So.
Making a stance like a net zero goal is one thing, but understanding how you can get to that net zero goal is really the hard part. And if you have those goals being pushed hard enough from the company, then one will have to find a way to meet those goals, and that's where the culture starts to shift. As we try and meet these goals, as we make these goals, as we try and show our worth for the future of natural gas, things are going to have to change. We are not sustainable operating like we have the last 20 years. And really the investors are showing that, environmental guidelines are showing that, the public is showing that.
So we've looked at, some of the leaders in the industry and what they're doing, what's working for the giant blowdowns, as well as the smaller, more everyday work. And the part we're going to launch into next is more, what about the cost, and how are you as a company going forward, when you are looking at those big projects, one way, and then you're looking at the scale of the problem when you look at those everyday projects, how are you handling the cost aspect?
I think initially, as we tried to kick off our methods, of course, there was a tie to dollars. How can we get this? Where's the cost benefit? What kind of cost benefit analysis can we do? And to be honest, I don't think that you can't put dollars on a lot of these efforts. To your point, the best practices and or doing the right thing. Doing the right thing is what we're doing here. And it really has less to do about the bottom line and the dollars being saved or possibly the dollars being avoided. It really comes down to being good stewards, being responsible, and being a part of our communities. These are the same areas where we go to sleep each night, and we talk to our neighbors, and we have cookouts, and we talk with the political leaders and our local mayors, and these are the activities that they want to hear. They don't want to hear about us being somewhat reckless and blowing down large quantities of methane, especially in high consequence areas, or downtown areas, or near lots of people. The cities and the communities that we live in, they want to attract people in, and it's not attractive if we have a bunch of pipeline companies releasing methane to the atmosphere. So it's just a way for us to really be good stewards, show that we are environmentally conscious, show that we are a great resource, and really, natural gas is going to be in the game for a long time because we can be responsible. Here's what we're doing to be responsible, and here's why we should continue to be, a cheap, reliable fuel for a lot of our customers.
I could think of a project we just did recently where we avoided a blowdown by moving the gas out of the pipe, and it took a couple of hours, and it was $9 worth of gas. And I think that economic factor is what drove people. They simply looked at the economics and not the greenhouse gas consequence of it. Even individually, it might not be part of a huge inventory, but collectively as an industry, it is. And we have to think that we're all in this together, and the survival of our industry depends on us becoming better environmental citizens. We've never been in question more so than, obviously the gas industry was in question back in the 70s when there was a question of availability of product. And of course, the new means to extract gas has shown, product is not an issue, and we've become a major exporter of natural gas. So the prices have significantly dropped. And I think that economic aspect of the product is really what is the major driver now, and we need to evolve past that.
To do it, and we've gone through the same thing, and really trying to justify the case to have pieces of equipment, various projects that might not, on a straight economic sense, aren't the cheapest way to do a project or to build this pipeline. Might take more time. We might have to buy the equipment, but getting down to the basics of it, our mindset and our approach is really, what's the cost to us if we don't do it, right? There's a cost that could potentially come up if we get behind and aren't trying to innovate, and aren't trying to move things forward. Primary venting. And what's the cost if we just say, nope, we're not doing that till it's mandated, and every municipality in our service area is mad at us or doesn't want to deal with us? There's a cost to long-term cost versus a short-term cost too. I think that's maybe where we're getting hung up a bit too. Is short-term, we have annual budgets, we have to do things annually, when we're looking at spending these dollars on various activities and pieces of equipment, whatever it may be, it's a long-term effect. And that's, I think, where we're struggling and really trying to, figure out what that long-term cost benefit is to do it now versus, in 10 years, 20, or upon being mandated.
So just from a utilization perspective too, I think that's where the contractor makes sense, because they're going to be outfitted to help you, mitigate any type of application. That's their goal. That's our tariff's goal. We want to be your partner to say, okay, what application can we not support? Because we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to support all the applications, and again, take that burden off of the customer that has to look at purchasing so many, different types of machines just to address it in a small capacity.
Yeah, so when it comes to the cost, we hear different perspectives. From the operator standpoint, it's really about right. Nick said, "What's the cost if we don't?" Right, or as Rick said, the future of our industry depends on us, being good stewards. And so when it comes to a cost benefit, a lot of these operators that are leading the way have found a way internally to recognize that long-term benefit versus short-term cost. And, as we look at that, kind of mindset, it really led to ask these leaders, where do you see the industry going? Particularly around this topic, where do you see it evolving? What's the future going to look like?
Is a voluntary, right? It's a data collection system. It's about reporting and aggregating numbers. But in the future, I think methane emissions abatement is going to be driven by regulations beyond reporting. We already see in California, the California Air Resource Board is responsible for developing and maintaining an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions, right? Many states are following suit. They're setting limits. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. There's no argument to that. And we as operators, not preventing emissions is a flagrant disregard for the well-being of our planet.
It's going to be too much for, utility to self-perform on their own. And when I say too much, not just because of the frequency of it, but when you think about dealing with live gas. So hot tapping and line stopping, you deal with live gas. Cross compression, same thing. You're dealing with live gas. That requires a certain level of expertise. And as you see in some of these utilities, a lot of that expertise, the 30 years of experience, they're going to be, leaving soon. So you got a new talent pool coming in, learning some very dangerous applications that I do believe requires a certain skill set that's needed. So you look at it from just a talent perspective, and that talent could be, leaving the utility soon. And that talent that the utility still have will need to focus on the day-to-day needed activities. So compliance related activities such as, your inspections, your valve inspections, your regulator inspections, your leak survey applications, right? That work is going to be needed for utilities to still do internally. Where I think a partnership certainly applies is in this space, in live gas. There's a reason why hot tapping and line stopping is still seen, to be a service that's contracted out. Cross compression is no different in my mind, because again, both of those applications are live gas related applications. And then you get into the responsibility from the owner and operator. So the responsibility of, having to track, document, and report all this, associated work that's happening on a daily basis. And then finally, just in general on the training piece, I went into this a little bit, but to continue to train, your internal employees from a utility perspective, it's going to be a lot. And this is something that requires a lot of frequency. This is not something that you want to train an employee on who might only be performing this type of service, a couple times a month. This is something that you're going to want to see that individual doing on a daily basis so they can continue to retain that education needed to perform these tasks safely. And I just don't see that frequency or wanting from a utility perspective to have your internal talent, having those responsibilities. And that's where I see the contractor is going to be doing it every day. They have a large footprint to quickly mobilize over to a job, right? It just makes more sense.
I mean, I think as we see just things evolve, exponentially from year to year to year, I think my advice from 5 years from now to today would be get rolling, do something, get started, take that first step, take that first lunge and figure it out. It's going to be different for each operator, for each company, for each department. But the main thing is get started and do something, and it really comes with awareness and having the ability to talk about it and understand the processes. For instance, there may be the ability just simply to change a process or procedure to limit the amount. Things are changing. They are going to change. There is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of tension around some of these subjects. The more that the gas companies can do, the less likely we are to have big changes necessary in the future. If we can incrementally start doing minor things to show these benefits, there's one less big step that we're going to have to take in a few years. So the advice is just get started.
I see it going more towards the latter, going more towards law regulation. Mostly for the fact it has if I back my truck into somebody, really I'm affecting 2 people maybe, right, or a handful of people, where emissions has the potential to affect a lot more than 2 people, right? So I think it's a more of a potentially a societal issue or impact than safety is number one core value. Most important thing we do is be safe, but the impact is, I guess it depends on what you're talking about, but vehicle accidents is a case, your impact there is not as societal, so that's where I think it could stay in that voluntary range, but who doesn't want to be safe?
So when we asked, where's the industry going, we heard everything from, hey, contractors are going to be heavily involved to this is going to be regulated, right? It's a societal problem and it's going to be driven by laws to, just get started. Everybody needs to be pulling in this together and working to solve the problem. And then I asked our leaders to sort of, draw things toward a close. I said, what advice would you give? And here's what they said.
My advice to anyone in that scenario is always try and find a better way. And so to do that, really you have to understand the current way. So get out on the job site, watch, keep your eyes open, be safe, listen, but always be thinking about, is there a better way? And you're going to notice 7 times out of 10, there is a better way of doing this. There's a lot of different ways, but there's a lot of times a better way. And one better way is, how can we minimize this? How can we minimize this effect? How can we minimize having somebody run out of their house because there's a large odor in the air and extremely loud noises and they don't like it? You are the boots on the ground. You are the person talking to the public here. What can we do differently? How can we possibly, first and foremost, try and minimize the number of times we have to do these blowdowns and perform these maintenance. But then when we do, what are our other options? How can I be comfortable out there on the street performing these activities and be telling the public of the good things that we're doing?
There's a lot of new discussions, new to many of us, about the impacts of methane on as a very powerful greenhouse gas, and there are means to mitigate it now. So, what I would tell operators to adopt no-blow technology now as a part of daily operations, and not when it's convenient. Right? The tools and equipment are available, and standing operating procedures must always require their use. The future existence of the natural gas industry has never been more in question, and emissions mitigation, it's not a good to do, it's a must do. So
I think that, there's certainly an educational piece to it, right? I think that it's, providing that message to the utilities to say, hey, here's a solution to support you in your net zero commitments and your ESG portfolio. But not only that, here is how you can achieve it. So I think there's a lot of education to still be done. It's something that is not required yet. It's something that I think, we can all foresee, the writing on what the future may hold. But right now, the way that I like to see it or like to talk about it, and as I talk to some, potential customers or current customers, right, we have the opportunity right now. It's an opportunity. It's something that shouldn't be feared. Take a look at it like that perspective, because right now it's not being mandated. Right now you have an opportunity to figure it out. Right now you have an opportunity to partner with someone to get you there before it does become mandated, and then that's when the scrambling might occur. So right now, the advice that I give to prospective customers is, look, you have a chance to tell your own story. You have a chance to really, take it on as an opportunity instead of something that's looking at it as a feared perspective.
My thought is that it's just going to be the way you do business. Right? We used to, in safety, again, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but safety is a great parallel to that. Is, now we pull through, we back in, we circle around cars before we get in them, and you can see the results of all these safety measures. That it has a direct impact on our safety record. All these initiatives and that culture change that happened over the years. So that, I feel like that's the path that venting is going down. Right now, we're in that early stages. We have some buy-in, and realistically, our culture changed. I don't know a better way to say it, but I am every day amazed at how well it is being received right now within the company. Just for the fact of its change. Not that anybody's against it. It's just that people resist change, right?
Yeah.
So down the road, I think it's just going to be. That's the way. That's part of what we do. Is that's part of the procedure. You have to evaluate. You have to do it. Maybe there's some SOP. All of that. I think it's almost going to be second nature. I don't even know if it'll be a thought to now. Putting your hard hat on your PPE is not a thought. I mean, you do think about us, of course, but it'll be that second nature. With every project we do, with every activity we do.
So I asked these leaders, I said, okay, we've heard, what's working, what's not, what the problem is, what some of the solutions are, and where the industry is going. And there's a pretty, consensus view. And the last question I asked is, how would you tell somebody to get started? A lot of people are really new to this effort. So how would you tell them to get going? And here's what they had to say.
We use that parallel a lot, our safety. We have a great safety record. We have been improving our safety, or I should say the safety numbers have been going down, but in a positive way. Year after year, we're doing a great job, and a lot of that, it's a mindset change. It was changing the way you're doing business a little bit, and really making it happen. The difference, I think, right now is it's easy to say, hey, we reduced this many injuries, or we reduced our vehicle accident rates, right? That's an easy thing to measure. It counts. Where the methane emission, there's a lot of intangible things we're trying to measure or trying to figure out how to measure. Again, back to the MCF, that's a easy thing to measure, relatively speaking, but that's only a part of the benefit and the value proposition of reducing or eliminating venting. Dollar for dollar, it's not going to, save you billions of dollars as a company by reducing your methane emission necessarily on a volume basis. But that environmental impact, the health impact for those who are around facilities that vent or potentially could vent is a thing we're really trying to look at. And that's where, to your point, I see the parallel coming, that everything we're doing right now is voluntary, relatively speaking, but it's voluntary. That you planning ahead for the day when methane becomes oil and water, or is it R22 Freon used to be in air conditioners that's no longer used. Can't send that to atmosphere, and methane. That's the mindset we kind of want to have with emissions here. Is maybe that not methane's going to go away, but we need to do everything we can to keep that in the pipeline.
Yeah, when you think about mitigating venting or blowdowns on a large scale, or even on that small scale, like we were talking about, right? Services in town, something like that. I think that, and this is based on some of my experience, and one of the reasons why I did decide to join a contractor environment is it's going to be too much for utility to self-perform on their own. And when I say too much, not just because of the frequency of it, but when you think about dealing with live gas. So hot tapping and line stopping, you deal with live gas. Cross compression, same thing. You're dealing with live gas. That requires a certain level of expertise. And as you see in some of these utilities, a lot of that expertise.
Yeah, changing culture is hard. That's the way that we've always done this, is extremely hard. It really takes somebody passionate. It takes that one spark. So maybe the spark was a near miss. Maybe the spark is a new leader, or maybe the spark is a VP of a company saying, this is our new path, and here's how we are going to do it, and basically getting the buy-in.
So that's the end of our time, but I hope that hearing from these leaders in this space has, prompted you to think about what you can do, within your operations. And, of course, I represent the ZVAC as a portable cross compression solution, but what we're really trying to do is put an end to the practice of blowdowns from large scale to small scale, and we believe that that's coming in the form of probable regulation as a matter of time. But we've had a lot of success in voluntary efforts, getting operators to embrace, solving the problem. And I'd encourage you, if you'd like to get started or have already started but want to understand how you can scale your blowdown mitigation, get in touch with me or our company, and we're happy to help. So thank you for taking the time, and I'd really like to thank the interviewees for putting forth a lot of time and thought and to share these insights. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Doug. We really appreciate you. Now we can kind of enter into a little question and answer opportunity. We do actually have a couple of questions that have been asked. So the first question we had was, how many ZVAC units are currently in service, and do they come in different sizes?
Yeah, good question. I'd have to pull an exact number, but I would say somewhere north, under 1,000 probably, but several hundred at least. And some of those are owned and operated by the utilities. Some are within the contractors like Artera, and then some are owned by us as rental or leasing type units. But yes, they're available in various sizes, ranging from very small units that are mounted onto a utility truck up to our quad or multi-quad machines that are really intended for those bigger blowdowns.
Okay, fantastic. I've got another one. Has the use of ZVAC equipment contributed to or resulted in lower loss and unaccounted numbers being reported by those utilities using this process?
That's a good question. It would probably vary by utility how they count that. I think there's some varying viewpoints on whether you attribute something to a lost and unaccounted for reduction, or you claim credit as a emission reduction. And there's some accounting issues around avoiding counting the same event, in 4 different places. So each utility kind of scores it a little differently, but what we found, the biggest driver is the ability to get it into the rate case. So when a utility puts something forward as, methane emission reduction measure, it tends to make it into the rate case and get approved by the regulatory, the utilities commissions, more so than some other effort that might get more generically attributed to reducing loss and unaccounted for. So we usually see it carved out as its own effort.
Okay, great. I've got another one here. Is there a typical threshold, like pressure, length, et cetera, that operators utilize methane reduction technologies?
Yeah, so this has a lot to do with what your pipe is. The guidance for a cross-country transmission company tends to be bigger thresholds than for urban utilities. We see some companies setting bars that have sort of a staircase effect. So this year, we're never going to vent more than 5 MCF. And next year it's going to be 4, and next year it's going to be 3, and we're going to ratchet our thresholds down as we evolve our programs. We do see a lot of thresholds get set sort of departmentally. So some departments are much more geared toward reducing the number of occurrences rather than an MCF threshold. They're focused on the events themselves, and then others, especially in a permitted facility or a compressor station, storage field, those are much more, MCF driven thresholds. And to the other part of the question, we really see the evolution of chasing those really big low-hanging fruits is where most people start, and we support that generally with multiple machines in tandem, to do whole transmission segments, going down into the main replacement programs where you can do a main, with a single portable machine relatively quickly, and then stepping all the way down into that highly mobile, highly portable. It's no longer project work, it's daily activity. That's where, we're feeling the leaders move, is to try to get to that, smaller and smaller events that are aggregated in the long tail.
Awesome. I think that's about it, Doug. I want to thank you for your time this morning and sharing with us. I hope everyone got some great information out of this session this morning. Our apologies once again for some of the technical difficulties that we started off with. And I think a lot of people were having some difficulty getting into the session in general this morning. So I just want to let everyone know that we're going to be emailing links to all the registrants that contain links to the sessions, just in case you're continuing to have some issues. And we want to thank all of our attendees today. I want to remind you that if you registered for this session and attended, you are already entered into the drawing for the session's door prize. And the winner, as I mentioned earlier, will be contacted via the information that you provided in your registration, so that we can get shipping information and we know where to send your prize. Again, thank you, Doug, for joining us today. Do you have any closing comments before we sign off and I give kind of our final comments?
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate the opportunity, and I would encourage everybody listening in to take it to heart. I think Brad said it really well. It just takes a spark. It takes somebody who cares to push down the road. And, it's what you hear from those people is it's a sooner or later thing. And, the people that take it on today get to craft their own story. So I'd encourage people to try to be that spark for your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again. I learned a lot from this session personally. So, and I know we probably didn't get to everybody's questions with our limited time because of some of the technical difficulties at the beginning. If we missed your question for some reason, I promise you we'll get to it. Or if one occurs later on, we want to make sure that we get the answer that you're looking for. I personally don't think it would be a great solutions conference if the solutions didn't come with answers to everyone's questions. So we'll definitely get questions answered. And if something occurs to you down the road, there's going to be multiple ways to reach out to us even after the session ends. We created a special email address, as you can see here on the screen. And if you'd like to, you can send us your questions via email. I know there were a couple of questions that we didn't get to that were actually on the chat, so I'll make note of those and make sure that we get those answers back to you as well. And of course, you can always reach us by the phone. You can call us at our main phone number. Also, that number's on the screen, and we'll try to get you routed to the best resource that we can to get you an answer. And then there's always your EGW representative that you can contact directly with questions. Okay, so this concludes the first session of the conference, and we're offering several sessions over the next couple of days, and there is still some time to register for the classes. If you haven't done so, you can shoot over to EGWUtilitySolutions.com /Utility Solutions Conference, but I'd keep an eye out for that email that's going to be coming out here pretty soon with all the links. Probably just want to use those based on some of the issues we had earlier. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this morning. We look forward to seeing you in the next session. And I believe that they have two options. One is advancements in smart meter technology, and then the other is the future of hydraulic butt fusion. Both of those start at 10:30. So grab yourself a break, and we'll see everybody back at 10:30. Thanks, guys.